No, not with the current instrumentation you have. In both cases, we only really have one seismometer at a particular location
Yeah.
relative to the river. You can do that, but you'll have to have a lot more instruments
Yes.
sort of along the river to be able to do that.
So we need to get some visuals.
Yeah, it'd be useful to know if there was in fact any mud will go down. We would probably be able to see from if there was one in Wallaby, given what we have to do today. But anybody in the Rabaka area, if you see anything, they could tell us. That'd be useful to know.
Yeah. Would satellite imagery help with that too?
Probably to a certain extent. But yeah, it's not. It depends on if there was a satellite capturing imagery around that time. Yes, you might be able to. It would probably be more difficult than say the paraclassic pose to detect, because the satellites have to detect some difference in the material that's there, and what the mud flow really is just a remobilization of something that was there before. So it wouldn't look distinctly different. You might see some erosions. You might see some godlying in the rivers that might indicate something, but it might be more difficult.
Yes.
The best thing is really visual. So either from the coastline or from something like a drone or something like that. You could try and see it in the valley.
Drones would be able to pick it up?
Yeah, if you have basically if you do an aerial surveillance of the valley, you would see.
Okay.
And you could do that safely with flying a drone or something like that.
Okay. All right. Now, what was the gap between this explosion and the immediate one before? How many days?
The last one was 90 minutes. But in saying that, I must tell you that there was something slightly. Mama was saying yesterday that there was something slightly different.
Yes.
So the build up to this one was slightly different, and all of the others that had increasing gaps, and it's still early days yet, but we think that the pattern is changing slightly. So there is no guarantee that the gap would continue to lengthen. It maybe is going to something slightly different. But the good thing is that so far the explosions continue to be not really very big explosions. Probably certainly not of the kind of explosivity of the very early part of the eruption. The explosions are more of the order of the ones that we've had, which are very discrete. They send a flume up in the air. In this case, this one only went up, we estimate, about 8,000 meters. Probably a little bit more than that. And a lot of the ash was at the lower level and went towards the west. So you don't get the impression that they're very energetic. They're not going very high. They're not as energetic as the earlier ones. But I wouldn't put too much, until we see how the next one plays out, I wouldn't put too much faith on continuation of the lengthening of the gap. It might be that the gap is now constant rather than lengthening.
No. You say there's alteration, and you mentioned that yesterday.
Yeah, there might be.
Yeah, there might be. Yes, sorry, there might be alteration. But are these alterations in terms of the overall scheme of an analysis of volcanoes or of soufre? Is this something which is somewhat the altered? Is it for the better or the worse?
Right. So in answering that, I'll probably explain a little bit more about how we think how volcanoes they erupt and how they operate. When volcanoes erupt, volcanoes are really just places where magma from beneath the surface of the earth comes onto the surface at some point. And there are fundamentally three things that are sort of determining how they erupt and where they erupt. One is the itself. It's a force that's called it's buoyancy of the magma, how light it is. Just like if you had a balloon and you put it under the sea, it's very buoyant, so it will get to the surface. Magma is also material that is buoyant. It's lighter than the surrounding rock, and therefore it always wants to come to the surface. So that's one of the forces that drive in it. But the second force, which I keep speaking about, is these things that we call gases or volatiles. And really, to a large extent, what drives a lot of volcanoes like ours is the pressure that is created by these gases when they come out of solution. Now the magma, the material that's down beneath the surface, it has these volatiles in it. It has these not really gases, but you can think of it like you have things like water and sulfur dioxide and carbon dioxide in the magma. They are part of it, but and it's able to hold them in it, just like how you have in a Coke bottle, you have gas in it, and when you rip the cork off, the gas come out of solution.
Yes.
The magma itself, as it gets higher up and close to the surface, it can't hold all those gases in solution. And scientists, we use a term, we say it exalts. The gases come out of solution. And when they come out, they form bubbles. These bubbles. And these bubbles, as it gets higher, more the gases comes out, more bubbles form. And when it gets to a stage where there's too much bubbles in the magma, it essentially breaks up, it fragments. And that's where you have explosion. So that's the second force. So you have the buoyancy, you have the gases. And then the other thing is if something comes in. If you had a chamber down below and something new comes in, it kind of pushes the magma that was there. It affects it. It changes it. It might heat it up. It might do various things to it, but it gets it going. So there are those three forces. So this volcano is driven to a large extent by those three forces. Now, we think what happened here generally is that somewhere deep in it, the magma chamber deep in it got overpressured. It got overpressured because something changed it and caused it to start to move, either because the buoyancy forces changes or because something new came in. And as it starts moving up, it starts getting, these gases starts coming out. They exalt. And as they exalt, it gets to a stage where it fragments. Now, the thing that we don't know is the extent to which, how much gas is involved in this eruption. And that's sort of, how much, we get the impression there's a lot of gas. And that gas had a hard time coming out initially. Remember, there was a dome capping it at the top, and it couldn't come out. And therefore, it pressurized, and eventually it went bang, you had an explosion. Now, right now, the gas is coming out, and we think that what's happening is every now and then, it tries to cap itself, and the gas comes out, it has a little explosion. And we think that generally that process is still continuing. So in terms of what you asked me, if it's the explosions that we have now suggest anything has fundamentally changed. I think that process where you had a set of gas which magma came up because of all those three forces that I'm talking about, something pushed, something came in, something got it going, and it was buoyant. And that is what is playing out now. Now, there's nothing to say. What we'll be looking for to see if something fundamental changes is we're not, well, it's a couple of things. We're not sure how much gas is in there, so therefore we don't know how long it will keep on doing what it's doing, right? Secondly, we don't know if there's more down in the chamber that's pushing it, and we don't know if that would be involved. So in terms of what is happening now, it looks like what's playing out is just that finite amount that came up and is involved. And if that is it, well, the explosions will become probably either of the same order or slightly weaker as we go on in time. They may be regular as they may increase from when they were to now as they were, or they may become regular. So that pattern, there's nothing that's in that pattern is fundamentally changing. But what we will be looking for going forward is any evidence that that something new is coming in, or that the gas in it is sort of getting to a stage where it's becoming pressurized again, and it probably could have bigger explosions. But so far, to answer your question, the explosions and the patterns suggest that we're heading, at least for this period, to things that are more discrete, things that might be smaller, events that may be smaller in size, and sort of things that are going to affect mainly the northern part of the island, probably dump some ash to the east and west coast, sometimes to the south, but nothing as intense as we had earlier on, because we think that a lot of the gas that came up that was involved, that started the whole thing going, was used up at the beginning, a lot of that. But evidence is, my caution in that is that evidence is that there's still enough gas in there to cause the explosions that we have. Right? Sorry, I went on for a little bit long, but...
No. I understand you're saying that there's evidence of gas, but it is unless there is a new source coming in, what you have there is not infinite, it's finite, and it would exhaust itself.
Yes, so eventually it gets used up, but we're not sure exactly how much you got there, so we don't know how long it can go on. But it's clear that it's finite, that it's working itself out, it's getting rid of the gas, and it's good if it does without too much explosion, without too much effort, and doesn't pressurize so that it could really have a bigger eruption.
No, I know you said that you can't predict with any certainty the time frame in which you may have another explosion, even one which is it continues to be relatively weak, not vigorous, not robust, and may at the maximum put some ash on the western, eastern, and even southwestern, but not as robust. And you say that there's there's some changes which have occurred, which you're not so sure whether they have shortened or lengthened the time between each of these quote-unquote explosions. But can you say with a reasonable degree of certainty, whether in the lengthening or the shortening, that you are unlikely to have something in the next 48 hours? By that why I asked that.
I mean,
things like
I think.
Vinlec is doing work, and CWSA doing work. Other people may be doing work. This is not an invitation I'm asking you for people to go up, go up into the area.
I understand what you're saying. So it's clear that, I mean, first of all, I'll start off by saying there's always going to be significant risk when any kind of work on the volcano once it's erupted, as a bottom line. So it's really a matter of balancing the risk that you face with what the benefit is that you need to have. So there are always, when firemen go into a building, there's a risk, but they're balancing that with the need to save lives. So there's always a balance between, there's no such thing as safety. There's just a balance of how you manage the risk.
Yes.
In the context of what we have here now, you have a volcano that's erupting, and it's shown over the last, week or two, a little bit, that it has a pattern where it has an explosion, and then there's a quiet period for a couple of days. We're not sure exactly how much days, but certainly immediately after, before it sets back the pattern of building up where we have, certain kinds of signals, there's a period when it seems to be that it doesn't really have very much activity before it gets there. So there's going to be a period immediately after an explosion, I would say the next day at least, or two at most, where it looks like, if it keeps this pattern, that there's lower chance of nasty things happening on the mountain. So in answer to your question, yes, if you were to take any time that you would want to minimize the risk of going in there, I would think that the time to minimize that risk, the time where the risk might be lowest, seems to be soon after an explosion, like today and tomorrow, say. So in that context, I think one has to manage the risk going forward, because if this thing keeps on going, you have to manage how you do certain things in the areas that you may or may not be able to do. Bearing in mind that there is always a risk, but bearing in mind that there might be times when it might be more, might be less, or might be more manageable in terms of what you have to do to get things done. And I would agree with you that should not be taken as a carte blanche, that people then, as soon as an explosion finished, you have everybody going back, and then you put the same amount of people at risk that you had before. Because risk has to do with the amount of people that are exposed. It's not just the hazard itself. It's also the amount of people who are in there. So you want to also minimize that, because then that increases the risk, no matter what the volcano is doing.
Let me ask you a pointed question, because I'm with Vinlec and CWSA. But still, in relation to CWSA, your answer would still hold that workers can go up with reasonable safety up in Hermitage and up in Jennings Valley, because it's unlikely that you're not going to have on the western side any pyroclastic flows or mud flows to humbug the guys where they are, or the extent of the ash.
Yeah, well, the areas that are at risk are the areas on the volcano, and Hermitage and Jennings Valley, and I believe those are south
to
of
the south,
volcano.
Yes.
So those were never affected other than by thick ash, if anything.
Well, Hermitage is in the yellow zone, because that is just above Spring Village.
Yes, that's just ash.
And Jennings Congo Valley, that's that's really just at the lower end.
Of orange, isn't it?
No, the lower end of that's the lower end of the red. That'd be the beginning of the orange.
Right, yeah.
That's the beginning of the orange.
Yeah, those areas, given where they are, would be mainly just affected by heavy ash, if anything. Not from pyroclastic flows and bombs and bluffs and things like that.
Okay, now I want to ask something about the ash. And this is I'm asking a question which may touch on concern civil engineering, but you have a lot of experience in many of the things touching and concerning volcanoes, ash and the like. A lot of people who going up, well, what I saw up in from Orange Hill going up to Sandy Bay, because I didn't go beyond Sandy Bay. I didn't go beyond it because if anything happened, the getting out would be real problematic. You know, it's too much time to get out if I that far up. I see people with shovel on top of the roof taking off the ash. Would this, given what you had said earlier about when rain fall on the ash and it has a certain almost concrete-like texture, would this, even though it's not tough concrete on the roof, would this not cause some damage to the roof itself? You may take off the ash in that way, but then you end up punching holes in a galvanizer or whatever your roof is made of with the shovel.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the general thing would be to try to remove the ash as soon as you can, though, because it's quite heavy and it's you know, it could cause collapse. In terms of how you remove it, you want to try to remove it as safely as possible, both to yourself and to the roof itself. So, I would say that depending on the roof that you have, you could use certain kind of materials to move it. And it would never be a good idea to use things that are going to punch holes in the roof. That's not a good idea. So people have to be careful that in trying to remove the ash, they don't cause damage to the roof itself. I think that's something that people have to bear in mind. Yeah.
Pressure hoses. That would be, you get water from a river, you pump it, you put it in a pressure hose. That might be among the safer methods. I don't know, I'm just speculating.
Yeah, I mean, I think also you have to, because sometimes the ash is really thick and it's difficult to get it off even with hose. So you just have to...
Not the ordinary hose, I'm talking about pressure hose.
Yeah, well, yeah. So I mean, my comment would be that they just have to do it safely so that it doesn't damage the roof. And they're not sure, you know.
And then
makes sense. I mean, you're doing that.
Then I see some persons perching on roofs. I worry that some might just fall off because it
yeah. Well, I think that's my point. You have to do it safely for yourself and for the roof. It doesn't make sense otherwise.
I probably will have to talk to the Director General of Finance and Planning today. Maybe we have to give duty-free concessions, at least for a 3-month, 4-month period, for pressure hose and water pumps, because, you know, a number of people may be able to get them from friends and family out of the U.S. And that might be a gift better than to send at the moment water, because the water is easily available in the region if we need, and CWS is bringing back the water.
Yeah. I mean, people have to be safe. I mean, this is hopefully we don't have as much ash as we've had before, but the ash is the main problem we have to deal with. So we have to find creative and sensible ways to deal with it so that we could protect the roofs and protect ourselves as we continue to deal with this volcano eruption.
Actually, this morning, I have, at 11 o'clock, I have a meeting with the United Nations experts, the people whom the United Nations, I think 6 of them, who have come down to help us with dealing with the issue of the ash. Remember, very early, I had asked them to assemble the team and equipment and the like. And they've been doing some work virtually, and I reported on that. I met the head of the team yesterday afternoon with the rest of the UN team. And we had, we didn't discuss the ash removal, and I'm assembling today our technical people with theirs. You know, I would start the meeting, but I'd leave the technical people to kind of sort out the issues with this, with cleaning up this ash, because this is a big question, as you say, which is ahead of us.
Yeah, and it's going to be ongoing. If it the ash and the mud flows are going to be things that you have to deal with ongoing even if the eruption is the ash will stop once the eruption is ended, but the mud flows will continue after.
Yes, well, you know, we have done some cleaning up out at Argyle International Airport, and we are opening this morning for people to come to move cargo which had come in before. And tomorrow we open the airport. American Airlines coming in tomorrow. But just like what is happening in Barbados, there will be ash in the grass, even though you wash off the ash on the runway. When the plane lands and all that, you know, from the exhaust from the engines, that dust is sure to blow up. Yeah. But
I mean, which is the point I was making, that the ash would continue as a problem once it's around, because it's remobilized. It's what we call remobilized ash. So once it's sitting there, when the wind blows, it moves around and sticks around. So until a heavy rain comes to really wash it out to sea, it's going to be something that's going to, even though you don't have any ash fall, once it's around in the drains and in the fields, it's going to come back and sort of come back into places you don't really want it to be.
Yes.
Professor, quick question. In terms of the ash itself, I've noted some individuals saying that they've noticed a bit of a corrosion wherever the ash latches onto metals and steel, etc. Does it contain corrosive materials within that ash?
Yeah, I mean, the ash really is just fragments of rock, you know, and crystals. And some of those crystals, things like silica, are quite tough. So, yes, the ash is kind of, has two kind of effects. You have the physical effect, that it's a grain of sand, say, and pieces of rock, crystals, you know. So if you think of mixing sand that you have on a beach, and with little bits of rock, that's essentially what it is. It's unfortunate that we call it ash. It's ash in the context of ash from a rock. It's not ash like ash from a fire burning. It's a different kind of ash. So, you know, we call it ash, but it's not really ash. It's rock ash, you know. So it's hard rock, bits of rock. So yes, it's corrosive, but also when it initially comes out, it might be, because it has certain it might be coated in certain, it's a sulfur-related product, so it might be slightly acidic when you add water to it. So it's corrosive, and it also has some chemical effect. So that's something that people have to bear in mind, that you know, it's a problem for your engines. It's going to be a problem breathing in too much of it. But there are things that you can do to minimize the impact by removing it, and there are things that you can do. So you need to service the engine more. You need to clean it from places. It's going to scratch, you know. People who have contact lens, for example, will have a hard time. You should take them out if you have ash in, because it's going to affect that. It's going to affect your glasses. If you have on glasses and you try to clean it without ash on, it's going to scratch the glasses. Because yes, it's very fine, but it's fine fragments of rock and crystals. It's not ash like it in a coal fire. It's different.
Right. And now that you mentioned that, and then I've heard the ideas of using it in the construction industry, but bringing in the corrosive element and using things like steel, then you may have to consider that as well.
In Montserrat, Montserrat exports its aggregate all the time, and a lot of the aggregate we have is from volcanic materials. So yes, I think in the case of using it for construction, you probably would have to make sure that you wash it first, because it has all these these chemicals that may be slightly acidic. So once you do that, it's fine for construction.
Any questions coming in by WhatsApp?
Yes, I see a question asking about the definition, defining an explosive eruption compared to just ash venting, and differentiating between them.
Yeah. So explosive eruption versus ash venting is really when volcanoes do what they do, there's, we tend to call them specific names, but it's really what I call a continuum. It's like a scale. So it moves from sort of venting steam. So, which is that if you think of pushing some sort of gas through a confined space, it makes a sound and it has an appearance. So that's venting. So venting is simply when you have either ash or gas coming through the vent of the volcano, and it's coming through it in a continuous manner. It's fairly free for it to come through, but it's still confined because the conduit through which the space through which it's coming through, it's a certain finite size. So there's a certain force to this. It goes up in the air. So when we say ash venting, we mean that there's a stream of it looks like a plume of ash that is coming out of the volcano. It's not a discrete explosion, like it's not fragmenting, and it's not a big boom, a single boom, but it's continuously jetting of steam, mainly steam and ash from the volcano. And that happened after the explosion yesterday, where it went on, and you could see it wafting off towards the west as the wind blew. In the case of the explosion, it's usually on the other extreme, where instead of just simply gushing out, you have had some sort of restriction, and the material is then fragmented, blown up in a discrete way. There's usually a single explosion, or often there will be pulses of explosions. There'll be one, and it goes up in the air, and then there'll be another one. And usually what will happen as it runs out of the ability to explode, what might happen is the gas that's still there will continue to gush out, and then it might go into venting of ash or venting of steam. So the point is that it's a continuum from sort of explosion being one extreme and venting being sort of the lower end of it, with ash venting being something between ash, mainly ash in it, and then you go to just steam alone, which is just gas, water vapor. Really. So you have steam venting and ash venting, and you have probably explosion. You can think of it kind of like that, and you're going from something that is less vigorous to sort of more vigorous and probably more dynamic, probably more energy involved as you go to the right, to the more explosive component.
Just a reminder, the WhatsApp number 1-784-457-2705, or if you're sending a message locally, 457-2705. If you're viewing the live stream, you can leave the question on the comment section. We'll be able to share that as well. Professor, another question, as it relates to a water system, is it a possibility that it can be contaminated with sulfur dioxide or fluorine?
Well, the ash, as I said, would have certain sort of traces of certain chemicals in it, and sulfur products, things that we come out of, the gas that we get from our volcano, carbon dioxide. First of all, it's mainly water vapor, and then you have carbon dioxide, sulfur dioxide, hydrogen sulfide. We've put it in them before, and all of those might be coating these small fragments of ash that fall in the water system. So we don't think the major problem is going to be those. Those are going to be, the concentrations are more than likely going to be insufficient to cause any serious problems. The thing that's going to cause problems in the water system is the physical ash itself that could clog things. But that said, I believe that, this is information that we would have highlighted to the Water Authority some time ago, and I believe that they will be doing tests on the water that is sent to people. They'll be doing tests to determine that the water is of a certain quality and doesn't have any harmful chemicals in it before they send it out. And I think that's one of the reasons that after the ash venting, they had to clean their systems and all of that, because they wanted to make sure that the water that they had sent out was of a certain quality. So, that's a long-winded way of saying that, yes, it could cause problems. No, it's probably going to be a problem that could be solved. It's not going to be that extreme. And finally, that the main issue is going to be more the physical effect and the chemical effect.
Well, what you have said, Richie, is quite true, because the CWSA did tests here, and they sent away samples and to regional international bodies, and all the samples came back locally and from overseas that the water is fit for drinking, that as you say, there is nothing untoward in it. In any case, the CWS has its own system of treatment and the like. So the water which is delivered is good quality water, drinkable water, fit for human consumption, of very high quality actually. And it's the physical issue of the ash itself going into the water supply system.
Yeah.
So what you said, that's actually what Garth had made that point. I think more than once since he came here, and otherwise on the radio.
Professor, someone is asking if azomite, I hope I'm pronouncing it properly, azomite, is it the same as volcanic ash?
I'm not sure I know what that is, to be honest. But I could tell them what volcanic ash is. Volcanic ash is really the magma that came up, that solidified from fragments of rock. And in our case, our magma is more of a composition that is called basaltic andesite, something between basalt, which has a certain percentage of, and the name really has to do with how much silica it has in it. It's a range, ours is something between basalt and andesite. And what happens is that the ash is really just that rock that has been ground up into smaller pieces. I'm not quite sure if I know what azomite is. I'd have to check that out and see exactly what that is. But that's what ash is. I'm not sure if it's the same thing as what you call azomite.
I think there was a clarification that says to add azomite is a natural product found in Utah, which is related to volcanoes as well. So I'm guessing it's in a different condition.
So, okay, well then, I mean, it's another kind of volcanic material. The ash, I suspect it's different because if it's in Utah, if it's a different kind of part of the world. Our volcano, it's a subduction zone in the particular magma that you have is basaltic andesite. I suspect it might be just a different kind of chemical composition. But the ash really has to do with the original chemical composition. The ash is just fragmentation or pulverizing or grinding up of that rock that has this particular composition. And our azomite may be coming from something that has a slightly different composition. I'm not sure if it would be basaltic andesite too. In terms of this, it's grain size. It might be different. Because ash is a name that is given to a particular size particle of material. So ash has to have a certain size for it to be called ash by people who study it like myself.
Richie, I suspect that when you're finished with these programs and public information, I thought at first that maybe we might be able to pass the first module in the program on volcanology, but it seems as though we might be able to do a couple of semesters.
Yeah, well, I'm going to start reading more now because I get questions that is the limit of my knowledge.
All right.
That's good. That's good.
No, I always want to, from time to time, I end by asking you how you're coping, how you and TC and Stuart and everybody, how you all coping? You all coping okay at Belmont?
Well, I think we're better than we were last week. That's how I'll put it, because the ash, we have less ash. We have been joined by 2 additional members of staff from Seismic, Elias and Avid.
Yes.
And Elias happens to be a bit of a chef, so we're being fed well now.
Ah, you're bringing your own chef.
Yeah, so we didn't know that. We said that if we had known that before, we'd have called in the services long time. But he's a seismologist.
Yes.
So that's why he's there. He's there to help out to the
very good. Yes, but
he's a technician. But
I
came with his benefits.
You all ever have anybody to help you to wash up the dishes, or everybody chip in?
No, we have to rough it and chip in. So
that's a chip in. So the chef, but presumably the chef is exempt from washing up.
Of course. The chef, we don't stay for more than 3 persons here, so the chef is in town, so they come every day.
Yeah, I see. All right.
There's a lot of ash around. It's not as much as it used to be, but
yes.
We have to get a place. We probably have to clean the roofs here and clean the compound because there's a lot of ash in the roof. But it's a concrete roof, so it should stand up.
Yes.
Someone is saying, Professor, I hope a tremor is okay and he or she wasn't eaten as yet.
I'm not sure. I haven't seen Trevor for a little while. So I'm not quite sure
boy.
what has happened to Trevor. We think that he's been found by the owner. She's been found by the owner. Has been taken care of by someone else. So she doesn't need us anymore. She don't come to look for us anymore.
All right. Professor, before you go, I think we can squeeze in these two quick questions. Any correlation between the moon's gravitational pull and the activities occurring at the volcano?
Not as far as I'm aware, but I can't say I'm too knowledgeable about the moon and the gravitational pull and things like that. But it is a correlation has been spoken about, and I believe things like that have been studied. And I don't think that anyone has been able to make a definitive and an unequivocal connection. So it's been written about, but as far as I'm aware, it's not kind of past the muster in terms of what we will say that it's, yes, this is what it's a bit like the thinking that some people have that, and that has also been written about, that large magnitude earthquakes somewhere in the region or somewhere in the world affects magma chambers in a particular way. They probably do, but it's not something that we've been able to show definitively that it always does or explain exactly how it does it. So it might be one of those things that there may be a connection, but in science you have to be very rigorous. So when you do something, you have to be able to repeat it before we accept it. So maybe it's one of those things that we haven't gone to that stage yet.
All right, and I believe we can squeeze in this last one. We'll have to save these questions for the next time because I know you have some other things to take care of.
Yeah.
The possible impact on wildlife and the parrots especially, and those wildlife in
no, I don't. I'm not a forestry person, but I will tell you that the forest on the volcano is having a hard time. So and the ash, I mean, we see what the ash has done to the trees. So in this northern parts, and if there were parrots on the volcano and there were birds and wildlife, they're going to have a hard time because their habitat has been essentially trashed. So I suspect the forestry people and the agricultural people would look at that, but the forest has been affected, and therefore, by extension, I would think that any of the wildlife that is in the forest and utilized, certainly on the volcano itself, and particularly areas has been affected in a big way to the southwestern side. That's going to affect them. I would be surprised if it doesn't.
All right, Professor, thank you very much, and we'll keep in touch.
Thanks very much, Richie.
All right, thank you. Bye-bye.
Now, we have been dealing with a lot of temporal matters. I just want to make an announcement about Monday being a day of prayer. The one young Christian leader had come to me and spoke to me about certain messages that he had received. And as a consequence of the conversation that he and I had, and also with Randy Brewster, he engaged the Christian Council, and I was advised that there was dialogue between them and that it would be on Monday. The program would be published sometime today, I suspect. At least it might have been sent to me already. There was a draft program which was sent earlier. And I was advised that unless there's any change, that it's going to be the pastors in the main are going to be at the Faith Temple Church, and then a lot of it would be done on the radio and VC3 and so forth, and we are hoping that 705 could be involved in this. It's the days of prayer we had before have not been public holidays, because we work and also we pray. And because there are many things to be done in the service of the Lord while we are working. In fact, daily when we work, we do service the Lord, and we have the Sabbath which is set aside. So that's where we are with that, and I guess we'll see other information coming out during the course of the day. There had been a suggestion that it should have been earlier in this week, but it's always better to have a day of prayer on a Monday, which is after the Saturday and Sunday. So I just wanted to make that announcement. And I want to thank, well, I had a conversation with Pastor Andrew Clark. I had a conversation with Reverend Adolph Davis. And I believe the requisite arrangements are being made. It is important that we, as the originator of the idea spoke about prayers of intercession and issues of repentance. And at the same time, we have to say thanksgiving. We have to say thanks for all the blessings we have despite all the challenges and all the help that we have received. We have to say thanks, so that I'm hoping that people who are at work on Monday, that they will put aside some time to involve themselves in this day of prayer. We are, whatever time is convenient, appropriate at the office of the Prime Minister, when we have days of prayer, we normally put aside 3/4 of an hour or thereabouts. Persons would gather and would pray and sing a few songs of praise, and we do our work as always with the, especially on that day, certainly with the solemnity that the day requires, the day demands. So I just want to make that announcement, and I hope that those in the religious community who are organizing this would hear that this announcement has been made. It is there was the request that I make the announcement. Of course, they themselves would to the religious leaders. So I just want to do that, and I hope they're hearing me, or somebody will tell them that the announcement had been made. Yesterday, every day I have a lot of different meetings with coordinating things and dealing with entities from the outside. I just want to, we had a very, very good conversation yesterday with Sidima and with the representative from the Caribbean Development Bank, and also later in the day with the entire United Nations team. And we coordinate a number of things going forward. And as I said, today we are having a meeting with the UN team, which they're here for the ash removal program, and our technical people will be involved. Just want to indicate, I had spoken before about our involvement with the Caribbean Development Bank. We are involved in several different initiatives. Some of them are bearing fruit. The Caribbean Development Bank had offered first a grant of $300,000 US, and a grant to the Inter-American Development Bank, of which we are not a member, but which the Caribbean Development Bank. The OECS countries are not members of the Inter-American Development Bank, but the Inter-American Development Bank, in their connection with us, they work through the CDB. So that's in the aggregate 500,000 US. And then there is a soft loan for immediate assistance of up to $5 million. this doesn't deal with reconstruction monies and the like, which we had discussions on yesterday, and those discussions will continue. And I want to thank the Caribbean Development Bank for the involvement. The day before that, I actually had, no, not the day before, on Tuesday, I had a conversation with the president of the bank and the representative, Mr. Bess, who came down. And involved in that conversation were the Minister of Finance and also the Director General of Finance and Planning. In recapping, I want to say that we have been in touch directly with the British government, the European Union. I've written to, as I said before, to the President of the United States, the Vice President. I've written to the Prime Minister of Canada, spoken to the Foreign Minister in Canada, had conversations with Lord Ahmad of the Commonwealth Office in the British government, who is tasked with the particular responsibility, having earlier spoken to the Foreign Secretary. Though when I spoke to the Foreign Secretary, Soufriere had not yet exploded. The conversation with the Foreign Minister in Cuba, President in Venezuela, the Foreign Minister in the Republic of China, Taiwan, several other leaders, of course, all through the Caribbean and others elsewhere. And I've been in touch with many governments or allies or friends all over the world. And we look forward to see what the solidarity is. I said on Tuesday too, I had a conversation with His Royal Highness Prince Charles at his request, and it was very good that in this time of grief, after his father's mourning about his father, that we'd have this conversation. And today at 2:00, Prince Charles is having a discussion with Commonwealth leaders on a roundtable discussion, which I would attend at least for part of the time. The Minister of State would also be there. Our Minister of State, Giselle Melissa Peters, talk about accelerating recovery and sustainable markets. That's the subject of the conversation. And on Wednesday, CARICOM and the U.S. Secretary of State met, the foreign ministers, and very importantly, the Secretary of State had spoken about La Soufriere, the eruption, and that the American government is giving consideration to providing further assistance than the initial connection between U.S. aid and say, CDMA, St. Vincent and the Grenadines. We are in touch with people in the British Parliament, in the U.S. Congress. Lots of diplomatic work is being done by us and also by our diplomats overseas, from capital and from overseas. I know there's been some discussion about, and I've spoken to this before, I deliberately and pointedly has said individual families at this stage, the best option and I gave all the reasons before, is send money to your family. To buy things because they're available in St. Vincent. The ports are open. The airport is opening back today. And for instance, the sending of bottled water from America or from Canada or from where, at this stage, I know some people have bought already, we have enough here and from the region. I want to make that point. Because the water is very heavy, and for heaven's sake, if you're sending things, send things what you want people to, what you know your family may want, not what you think they may want. There's some persons that are creating the impression that there's no food in the supermarket, there is nothing on the land. That's not true. The top 1/3 of the country is desolate in physical terms, and we have evacuated nearly 1/5 of the population, and we have about 14,000 persons, about 7,000 now in the shelters. The numbers have risen, and about close to 7,000 registered in homes, though one suspects that there are more persons in homes than those who are actually registered with NEMO. In fact, there's anecdotal evidence that I know that there are more persons in the homes. Now, and there's an organized system in relation to food for those who have been affected. And I will come to that a little later, but I want to repeat that I have said that the government of St. Vincent and Grenadines has a disaster fund account. There's another platform on which involves 2 or 3 banks, and that's up officially. There is the OECS platform. There's the UN platform. There are the platforms. The accounts by the missions in the various countries. For instance, the one in Britain. Senior Lewis and his team, they have done a good job there. Others are doing too, but I just mentioned there. I have deliberately not decided, I deliberately decided not to give the government imprimatur to this or that account which is set up by this or that person. I was advised up to yesterday afternoon that there are 1,168 GoFund platforms set up. I have no doubt that some of them, in relation to La Soufrière, I have no doubt some of them perhaps is for families. And I'm not telling anybody not to do anything with GoFund. I'm just saying you what are the platforms that we have set up. I know associations overseas have raised money. And when they have raised that money, they can decide to whom they will send that money. They can send it to an NGO here, they can send it to Red Cross, they can send it to Lions, they can send it to wherever they want to send the money to. The government is not involved in that. If they want to send any money to the disaster fund account, that is their decision to make. and they may give instructions as to how that money should be applied. Now, I don't think I can make it plainer than that. I want to repeat again. You know, the kind of foolishness which you get people talking, that Ralph is telling you to send money, don't send commodities. Because Ralph wants the government to put their hand on the money. You send your money to your family through Western Union, for example, or you send it to your account or any other payment system. That is from you to your families or who the individual is. The government doesn't get involved. In fact, what we have tried to do is to work with the money services entities to see if we can have other locations, because lots of people have taken the advice or have acted sensibly on their own to send money to their families. The lines are long. And therefore, we have an interest in making sure that people do not have to stay too long in the lines. And you can do that by decentralizing. So I want to, and I come back and I say this. Yesterday, one of my staff at the office told me that somebody had sent some things from Trinidad, some small package on some vessel which came up. And apparently it hasn't been cleared yet. And they're calling the office from Trinidad to complain that it's 3 days or whatever number of days it came up and it ain't clear yet. Well, it's precisely that point I was making all along. There is a lot of central supplies have come, which need urgently to be cleared to help to assist all the people in the shelters, which is about 7,000 now, and about 7,000 approximately, just under 7,000 who are registered, but we know that there are more in private homes, and some are in guest houses and hotels. And I had warned, and this happens in every disaster in the region. The ports do get clogged up. And I have to not just in the region, but everywhere. And I just urge that at this stage, send the money. In fact, we have made it cheaper for you to send stuff. You may say it's a contradictory message, that we have removed all the taxes. Well, they had always been there for the free barrels, but we also moved the $25 charge. Because I don't want anybody to have to bear any burden. But having said that, having done that from a policy standpoint, doesn't mean that I can't urge you as to operationally what right now is the most sensible thing to do. I just explain that again. And this is not just Ralph Gonzalez talking. This is the advice and the sensible advice from those in Sidima, those at Nemo, people who are involved in natural disasters, including people who have advice from the other countries, including from Dominica, from Grenada, from Antigua. It's the same thing. So I want to, and I don't want anybody to be texting me to tell me that somebody sent a package for them and they ain't get it in 2 days or 3 days' time. Because I'm not going to check at customs rate. I'm not a customs broker. I have to be very clear on this. By all means, you want to send it, perfectly in order. But I'm telling you what is the preference. Similarly, there are platforms in respect of the government. But you don't have to send to the government. I have told the private sector, for instance, across the region, different organizations want to send. I said, you can send to the Disaster Fund account, you can send it to Red Cross, you can send to Rotary, you can send to Lions, you can send to the Seventh-day Adventist Church, you can send to Salvation Army, to the Catholic Church, you can send to whom you want to send. Seventh-day Adventists, for instance, have an excellent infrastructure and a fantastic track record of doing things. The Salvation Army have a soup kitchen, the Catholic Church has a soup kitchen, and they no doubt expanding those things at this particular point in time. All of us are in this thing together. And we want us to handle this thing in an orderly and structured and organized manner without too much confusion at any point in time. I want to just repeat that. Now, in relation to people who want to be temporarily evacuated, the numbers now have risen as of yesterday at 5:15 p.m. when I have this document to the attachment. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Sandy Peters, the permanent secretary, she and her team are doing a fine job in collecting the information from people who contact the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Of the 1,017 persons who want to go overseas to spend some time either where the state in the governments in some of those countries, and we're talking now about, as far as we are concerned, the ones we're focusing on are those to the OECS countries, that is to say the countries of the full members of the OECS, St. Kitts, Nevis, Antigua, Barbuda, Dominica, St. Lucia, Grenada, and of course associate members like Anguilla and the British Virgin Islands. But there are persons who want to go to be temporarily displaced. 230 from the red zone and 159 from the orange zone. That's 389 out of the number 1,017. We have 48 non-nationals and others who are not from the red zone or the orange zone, 580. I don't know when those numbers are further deconstructed. We might have some of those are actually from the red zone and the orange zone, but the numbers, I'm talking about the information given to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So it's a trickle and not a flood. And we are concerned about persons who are evacuees. So if you are in the yellow zone or in the yellow zone, you live in the yellow zone or you live in the green zone, that's not what this quote-unquote program is all about. So so we have a trickle, not a flood, and that's understandable. You might have more persons wanting to go as time goes on, but it's a relatively small number because most people want to stay and rebuild. Of the 1,017, 48 of them are non-nationals who want to go back. I just want to say this, that I am I am mindful that persons, when they left, some might have left their passports and they would be, and probably are destroyed. Maybe. Facilitation like that. But in going to the OECS, it's easy because you can use your ID card. So I'm just giving broad parameters. Details of these things would be worked, and in terms of when persons may move and the like, would have to be done in coordination, and the ministry is dealing with all the various officials. At first, some of the countries had said that they wanted persons to be vaccinated. What basically they're saying now is they want you to be tested with the PCR and then you would be quarantined. That's the broad thing. What is being dealt with. So that's where we are with that particular program. I just want to say that there are lots of entities involved in helping to provide food. We have to do, for about 7,000 persons, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner for 7,000 persons. That's a massive effort. Just think about it. I just want persons to appreciate. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner. For 7,000 persons approximately in shelters. That's 21,000 meals per day. Now, the Seventh-day Adventists for a month is providing in 9 shelters 600 lunch and 600 lunches and 600 dinners a day. Other persons would provide some here and there, but the bulk of that, overwhelmingly, that's provided from the government resources. Then you have another 7,000 close to that number who are evacuated and who are in shelters, who are in private homes, who also want food. Well, there are a number of agencies which are helping to supply that. Red Cross, principal ones. Red Cross, not meals necessarily, but food stuff. Red Cross. The Ministry of Social Development. I'm dealing with the local things. The Ministry of Agriculture is starting to provide the love boxes. I don't think they actually start to distribute it, but they're putting everything in place. The NEMO itself, they have the arrangements through their warehouse, and also big one is the World central kitchen. I want to go and look at the operation on Sunday out at around lunchtime out at Diamond. But in addition to those persons who want food in shelters, and notice the numbers in the shelters have increased significantly. And the numbers in the shelters have increased significantly because it is now realized that the shelters are producing good food and good medical attention broadly, because some people have left private homes and have gone to the shelters. Now, you wouldn't go to the shelter unless you think that the shelter is providing good meals and good service broadly. And I'll come to some other issues, the shelter. This is a massive operation. And then, of course, you have villages in the orange zone where people's livelihoods have been affected adversely. We have to begin now to assist in helping to provide supports to to some families who are in distress. I'm talking about villages, for instance, where persons have been evacuated from the orange zone. People like some people in Chester Cottage, in Byra, in Goss, in Connery, in Park Hill, in South Rivers, in Mount Grenan, in Diamond, a couple of areas in South Central Windward, and on the Leeward side, villages, some villages in North Leeward and Central Leeward, including Barley, which have not evacuated, where the like Spring Village, Charles Village, some people have moved out down to Rose Bank, even people in Pittibadell. So you notice the numbers are larger, but those who are being given the focus immediately are those who are in shelters and those who have been evacuated into homes, into private homes. But then, of course, some people from the orange zone would decide to evacuate into private homes or even into shelters. Persons who they left back are in the same precarious position. So those have to be addressed. And we are just 2 weeks into this, because it's Friday the 9th. We must not forget that the volcano first blew explosively. So I'm asking for an understanding overall of the nature of the problem. As far as I've been aware, that you don't have people bawling that they don't have anything to eat or anything like that. Though I know that there are areas, and I talk about areas in the orange zone, people have remained, some people are very distressed. Of course, the faces of men and women are strained and anxious all about in the country. But I want to mention those things. At the shelters, something which we have to work on, and we are working on assiduously, is to improve the extent of sanitation in every dimension, because with more people going in, challenges are presented in the matter of not just people's health, but also common sanitation issues. No, I think I should take a couple questions which are on WhatsApp. There are other things I can talk about, but I always like to hear from people too, or anybody who wants to telephone.
Prime Minister, someone is asking about the diagnostic center. What will be done regarding that?
The diagnostic center will just be cleaned up like everything else. Diagnostic center will be cleaned up. The diagnostic center, you know, what amazes me, some people who say, well, you know, This shows you shouldn't have built it there. Well, what about all the thousands of people who live in the red zone and in the orange zone? What happened? They must migrate. What about the investments we put in the water systems in $23 million in Jennings and at Perseverance and in Fancy and in Sandy Bay? What we must do? Don't have them there? What about the schools? Huh? You must not have those? The point about it is this. Let us put this thing explicitly on the table. For those persons who are saying, and I know there are some persons who don't understand sufficiently the history of this country. There are persons who are saying, and I've read some stuff too, including some people who don't know from the region, or maybe even further afield, that you should declare north of the Dry River a disaster area and don't have anything up there. The people just go inside there and maybe they can grow crops and raise animals and let everybody live below. And to do the same thing, Chateaubriand and Fitzhugh and Richmond declare them, some even say Petit Bodel. That just doesn't make any sense for several reasons. But one big one, there are several practical reasons, and they're so self-evident to me. But I want to say this, as far as I am concerned, as far as the ULP is concerned, north of the Dry River, that's the soul of this nation. Garifuna and Kalinago, and all what they represent. Similarly, places like Rosebank and Pitbodel and Fitzhugh and Chateaubriand with Garifuna people. There are persons who will, I tell people, just like in 1902, people migrated. People themselves, if they find it's too dangerous, they will make decisions. Louis Straker grandmother, born in the Larakai, Walibu era. But after 1902, a lot of people moved away from there. In 1979, the village of Rosebank built up after 1902. Family members of mine lived in Overland and Orange Hill in 1902, and they came down. Some stayed back. In 1979, the same thing. A lot of people on Walvaroo and Glen and Sharps, among other places, they came down and stayed down. But others went back, and that is what will happen. And we will address that migration pattern with all the consequences for health and education and so on and so forth. But don't ask me to say that we must not go back and rebuild North Windward, and particularly over the Rabaca River, which is the bulk of the damage that have taken place, and Chateaubriand, Fitzhugh, Richmond. Don't ask me not to rebuild that, because they will be rebuilt. And so long as God gives me strength and where I am, I will make every effort so to do. I just want to make that point absolutely clear. So I know there will be lots of discussion on that, and you can have your opinion and you can say what you want to say, but I have mine. And at the moment, the bulk of the people up there also want to go back. And who want to have abstract discussions can have them. But I'm not in that part of that discussion. If you want to partner with me and the government and the people to build back up there better, I'm here willing to partner with anybody. So I just want to put that unmistakably clear.
Another question, Prime Minister, being that the red zone wouldn't be safe to return anytime soon, will the government be having a conversation with financial institutions regarding property owners who are still paying mortgages?
We should be having that conversation. That conversation has not yet taken place, but that's an excellent practical suggestion. Well, the truth of the matter is this: I would expect the banks, in practical terms, to take some haircut. I will hope that they do, and that would be haircut being a metaphoric expression for relief for the persons. I put that in metaphoric terms. Yes.
Will the government consider delegating crown lands to people in the red zone who may want to relocate because of their property being damaged or destroyed?
Well, that is a central issue. And the issue is where the land is available. And in some places we would have crown land available, state lands. In some places we will have to try and see if we could acquire lands. But what is becoming clear, because of land space, we have to begin more and more. If there's a problem of building laterally, we have to build horizontally. We got to build up in the air where we have space. That involves a different mode of life and living, different sets of practices. But it happens all over the world. And our people, when they go to the United States or Canada or Britain, that's what they do. We are not incapable of doing it. It's just we are accustomed that everybody must have their own house with their own backyard. Well, we are coming to a stage where as we move to the future, I believe that it may well start with people who are younger, upwardly mobile professionals and other persons who may, and some people may have no problem with it, others would, but it is a practice which gradually will come to us.
What is the current situation regarding the recommencing of online classes, especially in light of the fact that many teachers are now working in the shelters? Anything been put in place in this regard?
Yes, there is the Ministry of Education they're working out something, and the UNICEF people who have come in are working with the Ministry of Education to see if we can better carry out a particular solution in this regard. I want to say, just as a matter of interest, the other tablets have arrived. They've been here a few days now, and the distribution, this is for the fifth, the grade 5 in the urban area, because all the others had gotten, and the grades 4, 3, 2, and 1. From 5 to what you may say 9 years old. Those are now to be distributed. And the solution, I suspect that what you're going to have is something blended. You'll have the face to you will have distance teaching and learning online. And of course, as we are building back and we have to move people out as soon as possible out of the shelters. But that can't happen until we know what is happening with La Soufrière with some certainty. And at the moment, they're in a state of uncertainty. But the plans have to be made to assist with the online teaching and learning.
Okay, Prime Minister, I'm aware you have an engagement at 10, so
sure.
I'll take one more question quickly. For those who are returning, will the 7 to 14-day quarantine period due to the COVID-19 precautions in a sanctioned hotel still be required? And
returning from?
I believe returning from abroad.
Yes. If you at the moment, as I know the existing protocols, and the Chief Medical Officer is the one who is empowered under the Public Health Act to address this question. If you are vaccinated and you come in, you are asked to do 7 days quarantine. I suspect as time goes by, that time will be reduced. And I don't know whether it's going to come down to something almost zero. I don't know. That is for the Chief Medical Officer to decide. I know they were gathering evidence, not just here but regionally and elsewhere, to see what is the best protocol to use there. But the same protocol with the PCR testing, unless of course globally you see the risks have gone down immensely and you can change the protocols. Those are things which are always subject to change. But as of now, the protocols remain what they are. And if they are to be changed, the Chief Medical Officer and her team, with the Medical Officer of Health, will address that.
Right. Thank you very much, Prime Minister. And,
yes.
Wishing you a productive one today.
Well, it's another long one, but thanks very much for having me. And I want to say that I value the questions when they come, whether directly or on WhatsApp. And I'm gonna try over the weekend to visit a couple of places, a couple more shelters, and I'm going to get to go into the orange zone and spend a little time and going around and get a feel myself, in addition to what people are telling me about the stress which some people have. I want to get a feel myself. But I haven't even gone to my house in Goss. Understand it's covered in ash. I wouldn't doubt that. Eloise told me that they're photographs, but I haven't. You wouldn't believe me. I haven't seen the photographs. I haven't looked at the photographs. They have a note here from the Chief Executive Officer of the Postal Corporation. In light of the closure of the Chateaubriand and Georgetown post offices, the Postal Corporation has introduced MoneyGram services at Caliacua and Mesopotamia. Very good news. Very good news. So that we have other possible outlets. Thanks very much for everybody.
Thanks for
appreciate.
I wish to thank those who joined by way of the other radio stations. Boom 106 FM, Magic, WeFM, Star Radio Extreme, IKTV, UE Television, and VC3. That's it for this morning's edition of Iron La Soufrière, the morning edition. Stay with us.